So welcome back, Tweener heads. Welcome back to another special video today with Tara Moore. Thank you so much for joining me today.
No worries. Thanks so much for having me.
No problem. I had to enunciate your name because apparently Americans can't get that right. So I'm very glad that I checked before I even started recording this video.
Yeah, so don't feel too personally attacked. It's not you.
A nominated ITF player, panel position player. We 233 ranked in the world for doubles, Fed Cup participant in 2014, and one of the greatest comebacks of all time, at least on my end. Love 6, love 5 down match point. I think a lot of people know you for that, but recently a lot of people know you for your work with the ITF.
Yes. Positively or negatively, I don't know. It's your interpretation.
I think for me at least, it's very positive because from what I've been reading and what you've been calling it, it's called insider trading.
Right.
And why don't you break down what's been happening with you and social media and what you've been kind of trying to break barriers with?
Right. So I have a large social media following. I think just from playing a couple Grand Slams in the past. So I've been really trying to utilize that to speak up for lower ranked players because I do assimilate with the lower ranked players, and I sort of sympathize with them as well with how much information we're getting or not getting. And I think I do have a lot of friends who are higher ranked and are on these WTA meetings that they have weekly, which I didn't even know about. I am an associate member myself of the WTA, so I'm a half member, as simply as to put. So there are such things as full members, half members, and just people that can enter WTA. So there's 3 rankings of membership levels.
Okay.
Again, normally I play on the ITF tour, and I definitely would put the brunt of my frustration on the ITF with communication. But right now, with how everything is, a global pandemic, everything's stopped, everything's come to a halt. I think the tennis tour is definitely looking at the WTA as a leader, and sort of whatever the ITF does. Whatever the WTA does, the ITF follows. So I think right now all the players are looking at the WTA for guidance and information, and that's kind of where it all started for me. I was on my ITF website. So we have a website that we can enter and withdraw from tournaments. And I just looked at the calendar, and obviously I've heard rumors of the US Open going ahead, and I assume that's going to be with points. And I just thought, okay, as a lower ranked player, I'm probably going to have to play ITFs. What's on offer if tournaments do start August 3rd, for example? Looked at the ITF calendar, there was nothing. There was maybe 2 tournaments a week, and they were pretty much the 2 lowest tiers of tournaments, 15,000s and 25,000s.
Oh, wow.
So I screenshotted sort of the month of August for the ITF players, or what we have posted and put up, and just said, this is what we are going to be looking at if we are returning to tennis August 3rd and points are being given.
Oh, wow.
So I basically just wanted everyone's opinion, wanted to see if people thought it was fair, that kind of start a discussion. And someone who was privy to these meetings, the WTA meetings, commented back to me publicly. So if it was a private DM or a message or text message or any sort of thing like that, I would have privately looked at it and been upset, whatever my feelings were. But it was posted to me publicly, and obviously I was not privy to these meetings. I was not in the meeting, so I was not told that it was confidential. I had no information whatsoever.
Okay.
And my first emotion was just frustration, anger, and sort of disappointment at the fact that 200 girls or 250 or however many people are on these phone calls are privy to this information that 80% of the tour are not privy to. It was, I understand it included the WTA schedule, which it's not set in stone. It's not for sure. This isn't going to happen for sure. This is an ideal wish list, as they've called it. But at the same time, if tennis is to return, then these 200 players or 20% of the tour, let's say, have information that could possibly help them, practice on the right surfaces, but tickets for the right tournaments earlier than other players, and
get prepared more.
Right. Basically the more information you have, the better you can prepare. That's as simple as. And if the majority of players were getting this information, I would have no problem with it. It wouldn't have been posted publicly. I would have been fine with it. But that was not the case. I literally took the screenshot straight away, sent it to a couple of my friends who were also on the tour, and just said, hey, have you seen this? Like, what's your thought on this? And they're like, this is crazy. Like, I haven't seen anything of this. This is the first time I've seen. So my first thought was, okay, I need to look after my peers and the lower ranked players, and I need to put this on social media so that they can see that there is information out there. We're just not being given it.
So with the information, going back to the information that you originally found, was that given to you during the meeting, or was that given to you afterwards, or was it on the site that people just had to go and look up?
Because so I'm not even in the meeting. I'm not in the meeting. So there's only 20%, I would say 20% of players who are allowed to attend these meetings.
It's the WTA meetings, correct?
Right, the WTA meetings.
Full members.
Right, I believe it's full membership. That you can,
gotcha.
Even though I do know some players who are not full members who have somehow gotten into this meeting. So I don't know what the criteria is exactly.
Okay.
I've heard a couple different things, and what I've been going on and what I've heard the most is that you have to have at least played 6 WTA tournaments a year.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of, I think, the criteria that they were going on. So I wasn't in this meeting, so I wasn't told that it was confidential. I was not emailed that it was confidential. No players reached out to me to say it was confidential, nothing. Gotcha. So I just, saw this information posted to me publicly, and I just thought, okay, it's already posted publicly. So, it's up for grabs. And I need to share it with players because they don't know this information. They don't have this information. I know that. I'm in touch with pretty much people from every ranking group, and yeah, they were just as shocked as I was that this information was out there.
Was anyone giving you, was this information, what am I trying to say here? The information that was given to you, how much of it is public? Because I feel like a lot happens behind closed doors, and with you, I feel that the amount of transparency that you have created within the last 2 weeks has been an immense amount compared to what we've seen in the past, because no one has gone out of their way to show people, not just players, but fans as well, what happens behind closed doors and what tournaments are set in stone per se.
So my kind of, I can only speak for myself. At the end of the day, I can listen to what other players say, but I can only be sure of what's been given to me. And I've been an associate member with the WTA for the past 5-6 years, I think, which I thought would help, or they have my contacts, they have my information, so I would think that information would be readily spread, at least told to associate members. I thought that, at least we should be informed on, okay, maybe not every single thing that's happening in these meetings, but at least what the general conversation is in these meetings. That's kind of what I've been trying to advocate for. I think that we should at least know if schedules are being sent out like this, and they're sent out to 20% of players and being told not to send out to the rest of the players, it's elitist. I mean, it's like if you're working, it's like if you're on the NBA at the moment, and obviously they're just going straight into the playoffs, like what they're proposing is going straight into playoffs with 22 teams. The rest of the teams, I think there's 30 teams, right?
32, 30.
Yeah, 32. So if the rest of the teams weren't given information about how they're going to start up the tour, and they just had to figure it out through social media, there would be uproar, there'd be riots. I think, like, the NBPA wouldn't allow it because it's not allowed. So I think what I've tried to put up is just an insight of what's happening on a daily basis, unfortunately.
Just to give an update to people that may not be aware, because I think this all kind of started in terms of leaking information, like seeing it for the first time on social media. We saw it at Indian Wells. When I was there, a lot of people, especially I heard a lot on the women's tour, you could see a lot of them didn't find out about the cancellation of the tour until they saw it on social media. It was sent in an email to, I think, players and to like coaches or people that were traveling with them. But a lot of that gets lost in your emails. And I'll for sure say, and I'll admit that I'll miss like an important email because I get a ton of junk mail that's sent to the same email. But the transparency that's created through that and finding out information through social media is kind of insulting, I would say, for you and for the other players, because of the amount of information that you are not given and you should be taken priority of, rather than okay, who do we tell first? Do we tell our
Right.
sponsors? Do we tell the director? Who do we tell first? Don't tell the players.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the one thing is that WTA have actually been, in my opinion, in the past, been really good at information and educating players on what's
Okay.
happening. So this has never been a problem as such in the past, because I don't think this has ever happened. This has never happened.
Never happened.
Yeah, this has never happened. So with Indian Wells, I completely understand that, yes, they did email everyone, they did tell everyone, and maybe some of the emails got lost in translation, whatever. But the ITF, which is a huge tour, it makes up pretty much 60% of, if not more, of the women's tour. I can't speak for the men's side. Again, it's completely different. But for the women's side, you know, you have from 15Ks to 100Ks. So they pretty much cover your whole 60% of your transition before you get onto the WTA and Grand Slam circuit. And I think their communication has been abysmal. It's been appalling. I get that they furloughed staff and that they had to cut back on people, but one of the main things that I would think they'd need to keep pursuing and pushing forward is information to players, because how is it fair that you turn up to a tournament, which was what was happening? You know, players were emailing the ITF saying, hey, are you thinking of even shutting down the tournament? And no one was getting any replies for anything for weeks.
Okay.
You know, it wasn't just like 1 or 2 days and then they were getting back to you. It was weeks. It's so for that, I would look at the ITF and be like, you know, that's completely on your shoulders. But since the tennis tour has stopped and the ITF have already, you know, openly said we are unable to give information out because there's no one here to do it. You know, there's one person answering emails and we can't give you information. Everyone's looking at the WTA. Everyone's like, okay, what's the WTA going to do? What's their next move? And then the ITF will follow. That's always how it's been.
It just seems like they have to take more responsibility because they're the official governing body of what people see, what's being advertised. And it comes to a bigger question when it comes to combining the tours, not necessarily fully combining, but having one governing body to watch all of sports. Because I think with every sport, especially in the United States, there's always a president, there's always a chairman, there's always someone that takes full responsibility for the actions of the association.
Right.
For tennis, there's multiple components, and a lot of casual tennis fans don't understand that. ATP, WTA, ITF, challengers, things within that nature.
Right.
What's your stance on combining or having one governing body to kind of help with the transition with all these issues that we've been listing? Do you think that would be a good idea, or is there, starting with these, you're being nominated for a player position for the ITF, is there something that you could be doing differently, or is there something they could be doing differently?
So again, this is my opinion, and I've spoken to countless players about this, and it's been definitely one of the big questions during this pandemic. Like, we've obviously stopped playing, so we're talking about what's happening with our governing bodies a lot more than we would be if we were playing.
Yes.
And the resounding thing is that yes, players would think that it would help if all the organizations could join up and have one voice rather than having so many different entities, you know, trying to sort out different things. For me personally, the one query or concern that I would have is obviously the ATP is such a big, it's so popular, it's such a big organization, and the WTA have always been kind of in the shadow. I don't know if it's to do just because women's sport isn't as popular as men's sport, which is just that's just the fact around the world, unfortunately, and it is getting more popular as we go along, which is
of course
great. But what I'm worried about is that the WTA will become like like a running on the side of the ATP, and the ATP will take full center stage, and then the WTA will just be kind of like a side note. That's my kind of worry. If the ATP and the WTA were to merge, that would be the one thing that I would have a little concern. I would err on the side of concern.
The overshadowing.
Yeah,
basically,
the overshadowing, for sure.
So men would always take priority over the women, no matter what tournament it is.
Well, we see that now at ITFs already.
Of course.
So if you're at a 15K and there's a men's 15K and a women's 15K, if you're just at a women's 15K and there's no men involved, the way that they run it, there's a lot less perks than a men's. And if they're combined, there's a lot more things, like there's more shuttles, there's more food
Okay.
on site, just stuff like that. So you already see it in a smaller scale on the smaller tournaments, because the ITF run, 15 and 25 for men and women. So that's the only way I could kind of compare it.
I was about to say, when you talk about perks, a lot of people don't realize when it comes to traveling, you have to have transportation available. You have to have hotels reserved. You have to have food, everything like that. So it seems like it's starting from a lower level, but no one really sees that. And I think that's overlooked from what tennis is really all about. Because like you said before, it's the ITF is basically a transitional tour.
Right.
Not, I wouldn't say semi-pro, but kind of you start off there, see how well you do, and then you can move up in the rankings.
Yeah, I think for men, that's definitely the case, because you have 15Ks, 15,000s, and then you have 25,000s, and then you go straight into challenges, and then hopefully you move on to ATPs. But for women, it's a little bit different. Even if you're top 100, you could still be playing 100K ITF, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of times when I've played a 100K in the past or 80K in the past, and there's been top 100 players there. If you're top 200, then the majority of tournaments you're playing is still on the ITF. So it is a little bit different from men and women again. I do think that a lot of people who aren't following tennis like it's their life, don't understand ITFs as much, and they see that, oh wow, okay, you're playing a 15K, that's really good money. What they don't understand is that a 15K yeah,
I will get $10 if I win my first round.
Yes,
that's exactly what I'm going to be doing.
So yeah, it's 15,000 is split between main draw, qualifying, doubles, everything. So if you lose first round of main draw, for example, you're getting $150, and if you're winning the tournament, you're getting $1,500 before tax.
Exactly.
So you're not earning very much, and it's not as glamorous as one would think.
Yeah, it's fun to be a pro player, but it becomes a larger issue.
Yes, I think at the same, when I was younger anyways, I'm getting to a stage now where I'm looking to, settle down and all that kind of things. Well, I already have, but I mean, I was lucky enough to invest and buy a house and stuff like that. But a lot of players can't do that because they're constantly spending, $60,000-$70,000 at least a year just to help them, achieve their dreams. Right.
Just to travel, because that's where most of the money goes.
Right. And it's not even guaranteed after you do all this that you're going to make it pro. So to the top level anyway. So yeah, it's scary.
Can I ask you a question when it comes to funding wise? Did you have any financial aid from the LTA or from anyone in particular when you first started traveling? Because I think that's the biggest uncertainty when people start traveling for tennis. How did you start off?
Again, I would count myself as very lucky, and I would say that my kind of upbringing and my kind of experience with it has been definitely on the luckiest side. I'm from a very wealthy nation. I went to Bollettieri when I was younger. I had a full scholarship there. So I've always had help. I mean, I've come from a very poor family. My mum and dad are certainly not wealthy, and they are better off now. But when we were younger, it was definitely picking between, sometimes eating a meal and practicing. And yeah, so it was difficult when I was growing up, but I've always had a big support from a lot of people, and I think with the LTA, yes, I was with the LTA for a really long time, and I definitely got funding. But again, when you are given something as important as money, there comes a lot of things that you have to compensate for or kind of give up.
The responsibility becomes more. It becomes greater over time because the amount of pressure that they put on you, we're investing in you. Now you have to do well. So it becomes a bigger narrative within your life.
And I think I've always been the kind of player who isn't your traditional, I go and work hard for 12 hours and I'm with a smile on my face and, everything's happy. I've always asked questions. I've always wanted to understand why I'm doing something. And I could be very difficult to coach in a lot of senses, I've been told, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that being in a federation, you get a lot more help financially, but you do have to give up a lot of personal freedom. You have to kind of follow their rules, because at the end of the day, it's kind of like being at home. You know, if your parents are paying for everything, you have to follow their rules. It's the same thing. It's the same thing with being in a federation. If you're being supported by them, you have to follow their rules.
Of course. And I want to tune into that idea of you're a big inquirer of new information, trying to figure out what to do next, very intuitive. When it comes to the ITF, it seems like you've been doing that as well. You've become the internal source for tennis, because like NBA has Woj, Dan Schefter for the NFL.
Right.
It seems like all other sports have people where they get inside information. Like tennis, I think Steve Weissman or John Wertheim are the only two. There's only like 2 or 3 people. As in bigger sports, there's a lot. So It seems like we're getting firsthand information from a player, which, one, I don't think tennis has ever seen, besides a journalist doing it. And 2, from a player's perspective, it's different because it seems like you've gotten a lot of mixed reactions from it.
Right. I think, with John and Steve, I've had a small interaction with them, and both of them are different individuals, but with Steve especially, like I can see his kind of point of view is that they're more interested in the big tournaments, the WTAs, the Grand Slams. The ITF they don't really care about, which I understand. Like that's where their fan base is, and that's where their audience kind of lies. But for me, my kind of, I wouldn't call it a duty, but my kind of thoughts is that I'm playing on the ITF tour. My friends are playing on the ITF tour. I know tons of players on the ITF tour, and they're not getting this information. How can I better educate them and help them? I'm coming to the end of my career. This isn't for me. This is for the future. And hopefully this can be a great learning point and a great learning curve for all the organizations, and think, okay, let's inform the players. Let's give them this information before we give it to media, because most of the information that we're getting as players, the lower ranked anyways, not the higher, I can't speak for them, but is from media, is from Twitter, which is crazy. Like,
it doesn't make sense.
So that's where I've been kind of trying to speak up more on.
It's funny because for a lower ranked player in tennis is very different from maybe a lower ranked player in, I always use sports analogies, especially in the US, because you can have someone that's like a 5th bench player on the NBA, but they're getting information faster than what a person in the 500s is getting in tennis. And I'm just using that as an example. I'm not trying to say that's how it happens, but it seems like with the player boards, the NFLPA, the NBAPA, they have a certain duty to tell players and inform them with all their higher ups to what's going on. Tennis, you have to go through WTA, then ITF, and then social media, because it doesn't seem there's no easy way for information to trickle down the grapevine.
Right. Well, this is what I've been kind of trying to help start as well. Like we've kind of created a group, a collective called the Tennis Collective Association, and I don't know if you've seen it on Instagram. Like we're trying to organically collect players and try and educate them on what's happening on their tours, how the money is being spent, what it's being spent on, what's happening with your money, how much the percentage of prize money is going back to you. We're trying to educate players in that sense, and certainly it's definitely not a union as such, but we want to be able to create independent counsel for players, because at the moment everything's it's so incestuous. The tournaments have their agents speaking for them. The agents are agents of players, and they have so many different fingers dipped in different pies that it's all overlapping, and at the end of the day the players are seeming to come last a lot of the times, which is really unfortunate,
especially when it comes to lower ranked players, because like you said, when you put, using an English term, putting your fingers in different pies, when you have agents that represent tournaments and players, who do you think gets information first?
Probably the tournaments.
Probably the tournaments. And who gets the information faster? Who gets to make the decision?
Who's earning them more money? Just ask that question and then you get the answer.
Exactly. And I think the last question I have to ask you is, do you think the US Open is going to happen, and should it happen?
I'm trying to think about a way to answer this diplomatically. I think, yes, the US Open will happen, like in my opinion. Again,
Okay.
it's my opinion.
This is your opinion.
Yeah. And I think that, yes, they'll need to figure out how to make it fair and equal for points to be allocated.
And distributed, yeah.
Right. Because how are you going to make it fair and have enough participation at the lower ranked levels if no one can travel freely? You can do that pretty easily for one big tournament like the US Open. You can, as they've been talking about, like, chartering planes, but that's a different story. They have more money, they can do more things with it.
Yeah.
But should it go ahead? No, I don't think so.
Yeah,
I
in your
don't think
personal.
so.
Okay.
Because, and I'll try and explain why as best as I can. Yes, I do, of course, as many as other players do as well. They want tennis to return, and fans do, and everyone wants tennis to return. But at the same time, how can we return to a sport that won't be fair for every single player?
Yeah.
And this has been a huge argument within all tennis groups, like all rankings. The highest rankings are saying one thing, the middle rankings are saying different, and the lower ranks are saying another. And I can understand where a lower ranked player would be like, yes, we want tournaments to return, we really do, but how are we going to ensure there be enough tournaments held to ensure fair participation? Because normally at this time of year, let's say last year, for example, I went to a 60K and I made semifinals of a 60K. I'm just giving you an example. I earn X amount of points. This year, if the tournament goes ahead, I probably might not get into the tournament. The players might be a bit different. It's not the same. It's completely different. So how can you make that fair? And it'll be really interesting to see how they figure out, how to allocate points.
It is interesting because there's now rumors of qualities getting cut in half. The draws are going to be different. It might affect not just main draw of singles, but doubles main draw might be cut in half. Wheelchair tennis juniors, mixed, like all are going to be affected because it's not just us, it's everyone else. So I think it's tennis, and that's what a lot of people don't understand about it.
And how can we fairly and safely say, hey, look, the USA has still X amount of cases every day. Europe has X amount of cases of COVID every day. How can we say, yeah, go and travel? Like, yeah, maybe we are fit and healthy as players, but we're, maybe carrying this virus around with us, infecting fans, infecting our family who are older, and that we can really be part of the problem rather than helping it. And I think my kind of suggestion would be just to host national events, like the associations, the WTA, the ITF, the ATP can maybe help fund national events and really kind of build up tennis that way. And have the Europeans compete against each other with no points, have the Americans compete against each other with no points, South Americans, etc., and just kind of go about it that way and introduce the new way of tennis to players, because it's going to be different when we come back. It's going to be very 100%. Different. Yeah.
It's kind of scary when you think about it.
Very.
Because I haven't left my house in 4 months. You're in Indiana, so it's like, sure,
exactly.
Let's do it.
Exactly. So I think it's going to be very, very difficult. And I don't envy the people in charge that having to make these decisions. That's for sure.
Neither do I. But Tara, I really appreciate you coming on and talking to me about this. This was really fun, and I really appreciate your insight on all this information you've now given us.
No worries. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you.